all three slates running to lead student government next year have policies on their platform to address sexual assault on this campus. So I would just like to applaud our campus selection. We do as well. I want to share with you all a quote from one Mary Pfeiffer that I read about a year ago or so, and it really brought home, it epitomized rape culture for me, and I'm gonna share it with you all. It says, "Young men should be socialized in a way that rape is as unthinkable to them as cannibalism." Now, the only thing I would change in that statement is the young men thing, because we do need to recognize that a lot of our male-identified friends are also victims of sexual assault. This is not just a women's issue, okay? There are a couple things specifically that the Take Back PSU slate wants to work on if elected next year. One is a good faith policy. This would coincide with the 911 Good Samaritan policy and medical amnesty policy that actually Eric worked really hard on with a team of amazing folks in the legislative session and got passed. We plan to develop and pass legislation to incorporate good faith into that. And moreover, some folks on our slate who feel extra passionate about this, and hopefully, I'm not going to call them out by name right now, but come to the SFC debates and hopefully they'll get a chance to talk about some of this. The Dartmouth University sexual assault policy is something that has really caught our eye, and if we were to model ourselves on something like that, something that we could call the Vikings Bystander Program, students can be trained in identifying and recognizing sexual assault, so we're talking about preventative measures, and also sorry, I made a little note for myself and then lost it. It'll empower and engage students to recognize this as it's happening and kind of attack this culture that's much bigger than this university. Rape culture doesn't just exist at Portland State or at universities. This is an issue bigger than all universities combined. Universities are a very special place that we can start to address this. So take a look at our platform for some more information on those things that we're proposing.
All right, so this will be our last question. Each slate will have 3 minutes to answer.
So this one popped up a few times from the students. The question and answer forum was open until recently, the last Senate session. It was closed to students to ask questions. So I'm just curious to know, how do you feel about inviting students into those conversations with ASPSU? Yeah, I guess.
Well, as chair of the current Student Senate, I guess I'll start and address that. The Student Senate this year, until I was chair, did not have a public comment section or any place for a public forum. And when I took office as chair with the Student Senate, I specifically put on the agenda a line for public comment that allowed students to come in and speak to us, address issues, didn't require that they had to navigate any sort of bureaucracy or process to get on our agenda and bring issues to us. The reason that didn't happen at this last meeting was because, again, we didn't make quorum. So we never opened the meeting and never facilitated any conversation. We did have guest presenters come and we allowed them space while we were waiting for quorum to happen, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Moving forward, space on the agenda is very important, and it's a right reserved to voting members within ASPSU, and that's one of the privileges that comes with being an ASPSU member. That's why you join student government, is to participate in these conversations. However, when we talk about student apathy and student engagement and how they engage with, and how students here engage with ASPSU and their elected student government, it's really important that we need to not just have our process, but share our process with students. Most students at this university don't know how to get on our agenda, and that's unfortunate. But moving forward, posting information and providing information on our office, or when we go into classrooms and talk to students about ASPSU, about how they can get on our agenda and how they can talk to us, and talk about the points of access to student government. Points of access for involvement are absolutely key to getting students to participate in those conversations within our Student Senate, but within conversations on our campus as a whole. Thank you.
So I'm going to speak to this as a community member who was actually able to get past all those points of access by being invited to the training about microaggressions to ASPSU. And I'm going to say points of access are not enough, because when I showed up to the meeting and I was on the agenda and they made quorum, I still get to say anything the first time I went there. And I live really far away. I live in Wilsonville. So I arranged to stay until almost 11 o'clock just to make a 15-minute presentation, and I was unable to make that presentation. And that was, again, with me on the agenda with advance notice. So it's not enough for us to just say, well, students need to be better able to access the bureaucracy, and they need to be better able to get on the agenda, because quite frankly, this was directly related to the accountability question that was asked earlier. People need to know how to run meetings, and they need to know how to actually show up to those meetings and then do those things. It's really awesome to say that we can have more people on the agenda, and this and that, but a 5 or 15 minutes thing at the end, or even at the beginning, is not enough if basically student senators are not engaged. And in my experience, in speaking both those times, student senators weren't engaged. The second time, when I was actually able to speak, I was treated rather begrudgingly. People were texting and were going on Facebook while I was talking, and I could see it because I'm really tall, and they probably didn't know that, but I could see everything they were doing. So it's easy for us to say that students need to be made more aware of these things, but as a community member who's tried to present to ASPSU needs to step it up. ASPSU needs to be less about students come to us, students we can help you, and more about we are going to actually listen when you talk to us. We think that's really important, and that's what our slate, that's one of the major things our slate is running on. ASPSU needs to listen to students, period. And by listening to students, especially listening to students in these meetings, we think the ASPSU can be effective, but that hasn't been done, and we don't see that being done this year, and we would like to do it next year.
Yeah, so having a public comment period is really great. City Hall does the same thing. Pretty much every government body does the same thing. But I think you heard from Sam, he came here and stayed until 11 o'clock and you still weren't able to speak your mind. And I think also even if you do get the opportunity to speak, you feel that a lot of people in that room aren't quite listening to you. Maybe they have some better things to do, they think. And so who's going to go to one of those things if they feel like they're not actually going to be listened and it has such a sacrifice in order to even get there and get on the agenda in the first place? We need to be a lot more open about it. We need to be a lot more accessible. And like you said, not wait for students to come to ASPSU, but have ASPSU go to students. I spoke with a student after the Senate meeting where President Bevell presented who was waiting around for over a half hour to ask a question to the president, and they weren't allowed to because student government leaders thought that their questions were more important. And again, I can't stress it enough. It is more important to get student voices and actual students who are being affected by these issues into the room to listen and to make these comments and to participate than just student leaders. I think sometimes student leaders, we think that we can speak for people, but we really can't. And the people who are making these decisions on our behalf need to be able to hear out students, not just student leaders, because student leaders are always in meetings with administrators and they're always in meetings with other policymakers, but average students never get an opportunity to give that voice. And so if you elect us, I can swear to you, we will make sure that student voices are heard, not just by funneling them through your student leaders, but by you actually being able to give that voice yourself and advocate for yourself, and where we can give you the tools needed to be successful in that advocacy. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the slates for comments. We're going to start the closing statements